So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you for joining us for another 2020 Innovation webinar. In these sessions, we dive into a variety of strategic innovation topics, from continuous improvement to creativity to open innovation. Earlier in this year, we even did a webinar about baseball, so it's very varied. In general, these webinars give us a chance to showcase some of the renowned experts and thought leaders that we work with, and share their field-proven insights and best practices from their unique experience in the world of innovation. So today we're focusing specifically on the fascinating topic of civic engagement, which hopefully you were already aware of. And this webinar will guide you through the process of leveraging crowdsourcing as part of the process of civic engagement within your organization, but hopefully it can be relevant for you regardless of whether you're in the public sector, the private sector, or just even a startup. So without further ado, let's get started. So these are the speakers, as you can see. My name is Elliot and I'm marketing manager for Qmarkets based out of the UK. I'm responsible for organizing these webinars. So my main job is to make sure everything goes as smoothly as possible. Our main presenter today will be Steve Reed from Qmarkets, and as our VP of US Innovation, Steve works on a daily basis with innovation leaders at some of the world's most successful companies. And finally today, we're joined by Brian Worrell from the Iowa Department of Transportation. Iowa Department of Transportation, or the Iowa DOT, just became a customer only a few weeks ago, and Brian kindly agreed to join our session today, even though it's his birthday. So happy birthday, Brian, and thank you very much for joining us. So the format is a lunch and learn. We try and make this a quick 30-minute session that you can take away some actionable insights from. So first up, we'll be conducting a quick poll to learn a bit more about our attendees. Then I'll hand over to Steve, who will briefly look at the origins of crowdsourcing and collective intelligence before looking at the challenges we faced in 2020. And finally, we'll be diving into some actionable best practices that you can use, whatever area you're operating in. After that, Brian will join us for a question and answer session. So if you have any questions for Brian, Steve, or even myself, please don't hesitate to shoot them over in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. We want this to be as interactive as possible, so please don't be shy at any point in the session. If you have a question, just enter it at the bottom. Okay, so let's get started with a quick poll. So all of you should now see a pop-up on your screen. We have 3 very simple questions for you today. So yeah, if you have any issues, just let me know in the chat, but you should all be seeing a poll option. The first question we have here is which sector does your organization operate in? So very simple, public sector, private sector, or other. So if you're a consulting, you might hit other. Then we have you ever employed systematic process of gathering ideas outside of your organization? So this is what we refer to as open innovation. And finally, we have what are the biggest concerns when it comes to employing open innovation, looking outside of your organization for ideas, and that's a multiple choice question, so feel free to choose as many as you like. So we'll wait 30 seconds or so to make sure everyone has a chance to answer. I can see the votes have already been coming in, and it's pretty interesting. So yeah, we'll share that shortly. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Great, so I'll share these results with you on the screen now. Good to see that a lot of you are in the public sector, although surprisingly, the majority of you are in the private sector. So it's good to see that there's interest in this webinar, regardless of whether you're in government or not. And good to see that the majority of you have looked outside of your organization to receive ideas, so 40% compared to 33% no. And overwhelmingly, we can see that the lack of resources is the biggest concern, with negative feedback not receiving any votes, which which is quite surprising actually, because getting negative feedback is kind of the biggest challenge that some companies do see, like Starbucks. They had a big example several years ago where they launched this kind of system and it just turned into a complaints box. So it's good to see that that's not too much of a concern. Anyway, hopefully Steve and Brian will address these concerns as we go on throughout this webinar, and yeah, hopefully we can tailor the content that we provide now better, now that we know a bit more about you guys. Okay, so yeah, I think we're ready for you to take over, Steve. Oh.
All right, perfect. So everyone, Elliot, screen's good?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, so just a little bit about, first of all, why this is so critical right now. Right now we're seeing, obviously with COVID, with some of the changes that have come, not only across the US, but across the world, this pretty intensive demand for changing how we deliver, right? Whether it's government or a large company. And some classic examples of some of the winners, I would say, although it's hard to use the term winners at this time. Zoom, right? Great example of a company that, in fact, we're using that platform right now, and I'd say most of the calls I'm in end up being Zoom calls with clients. So Zoom is a technology that absolutely makes sense to be used today. Those of you who have kids, my kids are, in school. They went back last week here in Texas. And one of the things we're seeing is now hybrid models to allow students to be able to go online, especially those with immune issues and other challenges health-wise. And then we also see probably the one that we experience more and more each day, which is, if I'm a restaurant, how do I deliver? How do I reach the people that are going to come into my restaurant? How do I draw them in at a time where, and the big winners on this are, you see companies like McDonald's and Sonic, and now others adjusting to fit that mold, which is, if you don't have a drive-through, then you need to create a drive-through experience. And so this evolution of a virtual drive-through is a trend that will continue to move. So a little bit about intelligence, right? From collecting what we'd call the wisdom of the crowd. Just an interesting side note here. Obviously, there's examples. In fact, if you talk to a German, they'll tell you that continuous improvement, for example, collecting ideas from employees, started well before this, right? But one example of collective intelligence here, I love this story, right? A gentleman trying to get people to guess the weight of his ox. None of them got it right, but the learning here, which was key, was you take enough people, get them in a room and collect their ideas, you're going to get very close to the right answer, right? So, we see, we're going to take some best practices from some of our customers, right? World-class organizations like Ford, Cigna, UBS, Intel. These are things that these companies have done for decades, right? This is not a new concept. In fact, we would use the term open innovation, right, with our clients. But the same principles that they're using apply exactly to what we're seeing now with citizen engagement, right? Whether I'm a city, a city council, a small community, whether I'm a civic or a state department, or even the federal government, right now is a great time. It's actually critical to figure out how to engage your constituents, to get feedback, to help them feel safe, help them feel validated. And so just a good piece of data here, right? So the feedback more and more is we need to hear more, right? We need to see our cities and communities engaging with us, engaging with private sector. Now, I will tell you, having worked with state and federal government as part of my career for the last 15 years, obviously with Qmarkets, I work with corporations as well, but previous, I've spent significant time with the state of California, Homeland Security, and there's always been this engagement with, for example, universities. That's something that's very strong in California that we see, where state agencies are partnering for solutions. But really the trend is to reach out to those who you're supporting out in your community. So don't want to beat this up, because I saw a stat that said the news cycle shares 1,000 times more than they used to on this one particular topic. It's reached a level that's bordering on ridiculous. So I won't certainly beat this to death, but some of the things right now that we're seeing that need to be addressed, and I would say by companies, but also by government, is the following, right? And obviously it's with COVID. I guess the questions we're looking at are how do people travel, right? If I'm a transportation group, how do I allow my citizens to feel safe on public transportation? How do I open up parts of my community so that we can get back to business and start, offsetting some of the damages that have been done by COVID? Obviously, with the state of politics, specifically in the U.S. right now, we are seeing it playing out in a way that obviously we'd love for it to play out with direct communication, as opposed to some of the examples that we're seeing every day, right? So the ability to reach out to people and say, hey, we hear you, but we need to understand and we need to come up with solutions, right? And the cost on that, as you see here, is massive. And then finally, as things move forward, how are we going to, what's the new model, right? Just like the restaurant has transformed, what's the new model for some of our businesses in the cities that we support, in the states that we support? One example, we're gonna start outside, and I'll share this. We've got 4 best practices. I'm gonna tell you it's actually 5, and I'll share some other stuff. But this first one, I wanted to use a great brand like Ford, right? And Ford's been in the news for some of the things they've done, COVID related as well, right? Transforming their business. But this is a great example of the first thing I'd add is a key learning, which is you need to, when you engage your community, you need to go to them with a relevant topic, right? So if I put out a generic, how can we improve our city? I'm not going to get much response. In fact, to Elliot's point, you're probably going to get more complaints than responses if I'm that generic. So the key is pick a topic that's connecting to your community, to their fears and concerns. And COVID absolutely is that. In fact, just to share some insights, I meet with my clients quarterly and have kept some data on this, and we've seen a spike of well over 100%, in fact upwards towards 200% increase in ideas being submitted to specifically for COVID topics, right? So when a company internally goes away from an R&D topic to COVID, they're seeing tremendous spikes in ideas being submitted and engagement. And obviously so just to share what Ford did, again, this is in Turkey, right? So Ford, global company, 2 weeks, 600 ideas, over 100 comments, 1,500 votes, and some incredible solutions that came out of this, right? So obviously some of these are very familiar, right? The face shields, coveralls, right? Aerosol boxes, but Ford really found and applied some of these best practices across the board, right? So this ability to, especially when you're starting with innovation, if you've never asked your citizens to respond in a public forum, you want to go with a topic that you're going to get responses on. And COVID, safety of your citizens and engaging your community around law enforcement, around civic unrest. Right now, those 2 topics you will absolutely get feedback. So. Now to focus then, right? So relevant topic, absolutely the way to start. And then once we put out these relevant topics, wanted to share some best practices here and then move forward. So as you saw, biggest objective is really transparency. So in a corporate environment, to compare that, we see companies who struggle with getting their employees at first to respond and to share feedback. And one of the big reasons is they've never been validated, right? So if you talk to an employee and say, hey, what's your hesitation around sharing an idea or sharing feedback? It's this, I don't feel like I'm recognized when I share it, right? I don't feel like I have a true voice. And so what the platform opens up, right, is the ability for citizens in an open forum to share feedback to register, to see their names, to see that their idea has been received, and quite honestly, then to get feedback, right? So we have an example of a customer that I'll share in a minute. Their media relations person, she works 24/7 and is responding as much as she can to literally every idea that's coming in the system. So a great best practice is to be transparent, to validate what people are saying. And then one example here of being transparent, of opening up your state, right? Or in this case, Iowa, and we've got Brian here on the call, but Iowa DOT, right? Obviously a lot of things that any state's Department of Transportation or even, county or city would be focused on. You can see 3 weeks, right? Thousands of users, comments, ideas being submitted. And so, again, I don't think, for example, when they set this up, maybe LA or Miami, you might think of as having more concerns around transportation, but Iowa here is a classic example as someone that has done this, and they're certainly an early adopter. And I would tell you, this is an emerging trend. We are seeing every day more and more cities reach out about opening up and being able to reach out to their communities through a platform. So second thing I would share is to not dance around it. And Elliot mentioned the Starbucks example. The reason that Starbucks struggled for this, first of all, was this belief that Starbucks was this world-class group. And so when you ask a question like, how can we improve or get better? If I feel that there's things that need to be fixed, then when you ask me, hey, what can we do to get even better? I'm going to tell you what I think needs to be fixed instead of giving you ideas that you're probably looking for. So as this slide here says, it's real tempting to kind of put a softball out and say, hey, we were ranked most beautiful city in the US last year. What can we do to be even better, right? So to me, a great way to do it, and we've seen this happen, is what the city of Charleston's doing, right, with their police department. They did an assessment last year, not this year, but last year, gathered data and realized they have some challenges, right? So the way that they're addressing the challenges, to me, really is, this is a, what we'd call a lighthouse type situation, where Charleston, in my mind, is setting an example for the rest of the US, which is reach out, make sure that your citizens know, and let me add, as civic leaders, you have a built-in, so one of the concerns that was mentioned was lack of resources, and we absolutely hear you on this. You also have a built-in advantage that will offset some of that, and the first is the media. So as you work on addressing crime, work on addressing traffic, work on addressing law enforcement challenges, racial struggles, COVID type topics, the best way to do it is to reach out to those local stations that, by the way, that's all they want to put on the news right now anyway. So take advantage of that, right? Work through your media departments, engage with your local community, and promote this before you launch it, right? Get online and say, hey, look, here's what we want to do. We understand there are concerns and problems, so we want your solutions, right? Focus on the solution, and I guarantee you, again, instead of dancing around it, you're going to see some tremendous results where people say, hey, here's my idea on how to fix this. This is a kind of a fun example for us. This happened in Canada. So we started working with the Liberal Party of Canada several years ago, where they had this great idea of their platform, right? And the Liberal Party in Canada is the dominant party. We're talking 100 million people, right? Essentially, belong to this organization. And so their idea was, we have a platform with certain tenets that we believe in. And instead of having a discussion in Halifax, which is where it was in 2018, let's open this up to the entire country. And so they promoted this. There was buzz around it. It was reported in the news. The results were really impressive, right? So they received thousands of comments. They were able to get feedback on, and instead of asking for ideas, they essentially said, here are our ideas, but we want your feedback. And a very interesting approach. They downloaded all these comments, took them with them to Halifax, and had great discussion, you know, as legislature, as leaders in the Liberal Party around these topics. So you don't always have to ask a question. Sometimes you have potential answers and you just want feedback from your citizens. So, and on that note, I want to share a best practice. So as a community, as a city, as a state, if you are reaching out, really important that you recognize that your citizens can't be, this isn't Twitter, right? This is not Facebook, but especially Twitter, where people are aggressive because you're anonymous, right? The Canadian government required self-registration, that you identify yourself, that there's an email attached with this, and you can't hide behind, again, the Twitter concept of being very aggressive and bullying. So when you do this, make sure that your citizens there's a process that they have to recognize who they are. And then finally, this last one, and we've kept it short. This last concept I want to share is one that we're seeing more and more. First of all, with our corporate clients, right? So for a long time now, any company that works with Qmarkets, as they're soliciting ideas, has what we call a join the team concept. And the way join the team works is, I see an idea I like, I'm an engineer, I'm in finance, and I say, hey, this is something that I would like to engage in. And we see great companies, again, Ford, the Nestle's, the Lufthansas, the Cignas. This is a best practice that's been ingrained, right? Which is, here's a project I'd like to be a part of if it moves forward. And so we're seeing now, this is, again, Atlanta, one of my favorite cities in the US. They have wonderful representation there. A gentleman named Lyle Harris that we work with really thought it was critical that as the City of Atlanta's transportation group starts engaging citizens, that they develop a platform, right? A place where people can share feedback. But again, they've taken it a step further, and I'm seeing other cities, I'm seeing this is a clear trend, which is allow citizens who are engaged, right? So if you put out a topic in Houston, Texas, you may only get 500 responses, but out of those, you see a lot, maybe 20, 30, 40 are very passionate about it. One of the things that you can do to engage your citizens is to say, hey, come on in. We want you on the inside, right? And in the corporate world, we call it design thinking, right? Which is, I see a problem, I empathize with that persona who is dealing with that problem, and then I come up with solutions. And Atlanta, again, kudos to them, is taking this approach and saying, we want people to be on our advisory group, to be able to give us feedback so that we can improve the overall experience, right? Safety, travel times, all that is covered under this ability to reach out to them. So those are some of the best practices, and then I would add on, again, we're going to add here. So we had 4 + 1. I'm going to add one more that I like, which is, it starts with a relevant topic, and once you get that feedback, it's time to implement. Let your citizens know what's been implemented by them, but then move on to what's next, right? In this case, take additional topics. And so you can see here on the screen some examples of government objectives as they're reaching out to citizens, right? So I could name some cities: New York, Miami, the Bay Area, and San Francisco are addressing topics around safety, traffic, tourism, growth. I'm in Dallas, and we see this massive growth, and how do we keep up with it? So the trend is clear. The town hall has moved from a physical meeting in a building, part of it due to COVID, but part of it due to allowing access. And now every citizen has the ability to share feedback, ideas, to communicate with one another, and to be part of a bigger solution, and really impact your community by doing that. So to address all this, Qmarkets is introducing and has introduced what we're calling the Eureka Project. And what it is a free glimpse at innovation. It's a 30-day program, and really addresses what's happening, right? And when we say cities, it could be states, it could be communities, it could be any variety of groups that represent the public, right? But you're essentially reaching out to your groups for 30 days, and I'm happy to cover this with those of you who are joining. We'll be sure to reach out and share more about this program. But essentially, you're going to have the ability to have a platform for 30 days. We'll help with the questions, right? We have some great experience with that and customers that are doing it. And we will walk you through this process where, again, you can collect ideas from your citizens around COVID, racial challenges in your community, community safety, right? So these are just some classic examples of potential topics that you can cover. And again, no charge for this. We're happy to help with it. And Elliot is displaying now just a glimpse at one example of potentially how it looks. Obviously, Metropolis would say your city, Smallville would say your city name, but it'll be your branding customized to look and feel like you want, with relevant topics that you believe your community will want to engage around. So with that, Elliot.
So yeah, it looks like we're starting to run out of time, so I think we can dive straight into the Q&A. So Brian, are you with us?
I am here.
Wonderful. Hey there. So yeah, first of all, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you being here with us today. Could you start by just sharing a few words about yourself, maybe about your role at the Iowa DOT?
Sure. As you know, Brian Worrell, I serve as the Research Program Manager at the Iowa DOT. So we have a small group of folks, about 7 or so of us, and we function as kind of we think of ourselves as a connection or a bridge between all the different departments within the agency and all of our stakeholders, both public and private, throughout the state and our region and our nation. So we try to take ideas that folks are wanting to explore further, put them together with experts in that area and put some funding behind them and let them go and improve the way we do products and methods and policies and whatever else the DOT touches. Really, everything's fair game. So we like to think of ourselves as connectors within the agency.
Great. Cool. So we have a few questions that have come in. So first of all, we have this one which says, what's the most important thing when securing internal buy-in for an idea management platform? Are there any specific challenges you faced as a public sector body?
Sure. So I think all the folks we work with are all volunteers within our agency. They have their normal jobs and they're doing research projects on top of that. So for us, probably the number one thing is just to show the value. If a fellow employee of ours inside our agency gets connected to a research project and can follow it through to completion and see that final product and the improvement in what they were looking for, they're pretty much sold from that point on. So I think if you can really tout the value of what you're doing and the engagement and everything that you're providing, that's probably a priority for you.
Great. Yeah. So that comes back to the transparency, which was the first best practice. Steve, do you have anything to add on that?
No. We'll go with the expert here, Brian.
The second one we've got here is there are a lot of different options when it comes to setting up a new platform, and we don't really know where to start. What would your advice be to us?
I would say map out and know your system first. What are you currently doing? And know where you want to get. Then once you have that, identify the areas that can change, what's something that can be flexible, but also know what can't change, what are the non-negotiables. And once you have that, it's a lot easier to try on different platforms and see where you can fit within the sandboxes that they provide in order to modify your current process to where you want to go. So that's the approach we took, and it seemed to work pretty well.
Great. Well, it led you to choosing Qmarkets, so I think you made the right choice in the process you used.
And let me just add to that. I think there's a couple of things. One is, and we see this sometimes, not a lot, but where a client sees the platform, but maybe hasn't established a clear vision of what they want to have happen. And so I would tell you, the driver of this needs to be pain, right? And that word obviously comes with a kind of a cringe, but your agency, your city, your state, there needs to be a pain that's felt, right? It's not just a platform to collect ideas to check a box. It's essentially, here's where we're struggling. And in the corporate world, this happens every day, right? From a top-down perspective, we need to solve this problem, right? We're falling behind, we're losing margin, we're not retaining our employees. How do we fix this, right? So that same principle should apply to your community, city, state, local, federal, which is, we have these challenges and now we want to address it, right? And once you have that and some clear goals, because for some cities, 10 ideas a year that are really well thought out, to them is a home run, right? And in some cities, thousands of ideas will flow in. So it's really, the goals need to be realistic. And then I would share as a following is, there's a reason companies, right? And Brian, you can probably testify to this. Iowa DOT doesn't build things. They look for best-in-class solutions to fit needs. That's a corporate principle that we see applies to this as well, right? So don't try and reinvent the wheel. Trust our best practices. The Eureka project is about as safe as you can get. It's free, it's simple, there's really not much work to it. It can be set up in literally days. And it's a chance to try out, right? Test drive innovation or feedback from our community. So trust those best practices at the start. And over time, you'll start to say, hey, we want to do this now. We want to do this now. So let those vendors that are, experienced with it guide you on that journey.
Yeah, Steve, I got to say, I'm a little bit jealous of the Eureka project. I wish that would have been around when we started the process. So if you can take advantage of it, go for it.
Let's talk.
Thanks, Steve. So one more question here. Brian, what do you see in the future for ideation at the Iowa DOT?
Really, my goal, our two main goals with the system were engagement and transparency. And I think transparency is built in throughout. But my larger goal, I think, is just more and more engagement with all of the sectors and our stakeholders, both internal, the public sector, our private sector partners, our university partners, just getting a space for those folks to be able to collaborate together on more and more of our projects. We would like to launch into specialized campaigns as we get to start to drive the program more on a proactive basis than a reactive basis. And just being able to reach out to further stakeholders, moving it beyond our state into our region and our nation as well, with all of our cohorts across, also running programs, research programs. So dreaming big, but we got to take the first steps to start establishing the base here.
Wonderful.
Hey,
Okay.
did you see that there's one question that also came in additionally just now? Did you see that one potentially, Elliot, there in the Q&A?
Have a look. It's
that's more technical.
Yeah, it's how many tenants does Qmarkets allow to implement in its QOpen platform? And to answer that, for me, as far as I'm aware, there's no limit. So we can discuss that more offline. But if any of you have any additional questions, we can definitely address those. Please just feel free to shoot them over in an email. But for now, I think that's all we've got time for. So thank you very much, Steve, and thank you so much, Brian, for participating in this. We really appreciate all the insights you've shared. And thank you to all the attendees who've joined us today. So if you'd like to learn more about anything we've discussed, including the Eureka project, please don't hesitate to reach out. As I mentioned in the comments, we'll be sending out a recording of this webinar within the next week or so. And hopefully we'll see you on the next webinar. So thanks again, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Great.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Elliot.